We are coming to one of the most interesting panels of our forum, the panel that will focus on port infrastructure, the preparedness of ports in terms of logistics and infrastructure for decarbonization. And we are gratified to have with us the heads of three major global port authorities: Singapore, Rotterdam, and Hamburg. I will let Cristina Migliaro introduce from RINA, who is going to moderate, introduce our esteemed panelists. All I want is to say a tremendous thanks. We are really honored to have the three of you with us. And Cristina, thank you for moderating.
Thank you for the floor. Good afternoon and good morning to everybody. As you know, we are here today to discuss what have already been carried out and what next for paving the way to achieve sustainable goals in the ports. We are very lucky, as already said, as we have with us Mrs. Hoon, the Chief Executive Officer of the Maritime and Port Authority of Singapore. We have Mr. Allard Castelein, President and Chief Executive Officer of Rotterdam Port Authority. And we have Mr. Jens Meier, Chairman of Hamburg Port Authority. Welcome. Just a short introduction to say that the port authorities worldwide have been invited to take a pledge towards sustainable goals, and most of them touched base. So we have as panelists the representatives of three global leading ports, which have been embedding sustainability in their core strategy since sometimes. So I know that their strategy embrace among several paths and topics, for instance, mutual cooperation and dialogue about the technology outreach programs among port authority itself, and also the introduction, thanks to new technology, of digitalization and decarbonization in port operation. So this session will be organized in roundtable questions. And I would like, ladies first, I would like to start, thanks to Mrs. Hoon. As we all know, Singapore Port Authority, for instance, has a fantastic LNG bunkering new system and hydrogen-fueled automated guided vehicle prototype. So a lot of things has already been done. Looking at the present and the past, the main issues or the success stories you have reached out to join, to share with us.
Thank you, Cristina, and to Capital Link for inviting. Very honored to be with very distinguished panelists, Jens and Allard, whom we respect a lot from Singapore. To your question, I think the direction towards new fuel is definitely something which all of us are grappling with together with the industry on what is the direction to move towards. The one thing we take pride in Singapore, that's your question, really is to play our role as an efficient major transshipment hub. So as a hub, port that handles 1/7 of the world's transshipment volume and about 85% of the containers, we help to contribute to efficiency in the global supply chain as well as environmental sustainability. And on that, because we are connected to some 600 ports via 300 service routes, linking up to 28,000 port pairs, so the shipping directly would have sort of lengthened the existing services and adding new trips. So by being an efficient transshipment hub, we have contributed to the national agenda, including on global the greenhouse gas emissions. The second part, which we hope to work closer with other ports, and I think we are already in some of the collaborations with both Hamburg and Rotterdam, really is like what you mentioned in the area of bunkering, for example. We have started on LNG bunkering. Now the question is, what is the next future fuel? And that when the future ship arrives, or before the future ship arrives, we would have a cluster of ports with the infrastructure that is ready to bunker the new fuel, whether it's ammonia, biofuel, bio-LNG, or hydrogen. So that would be the two key things I would want to raise now. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Well, cutting through the jungle and going to the Rotterdam Port Authority. We all know that you have been implementing sustainability in your core strategy since a long time. You are thinking about acting as a hydrogen hub in this sector and in this cluster in the Northern Range, not as the only one. And also for you, in the past until today, the success cases or the faced problems you have entailed in this process towards sustainability.
Yeah, so I hope my voice comes through loud and clear. My image is frozen, unfortunately, but assuming the message can be shared and heard. Again, also my appreciation for being able to join this panel. It's my pleasure. Port of Rotterdam actually embraced the need for an energy transition right alongside the timing of the Paris Climate Agreement, and identified that the disruption associated to the energy transition should deliver opportunities rather than threats. And so we, in the follow-up and the aftermath, we kind of reflected on what could our role and should our role be. And if one assumes that and recognizes that sea trade accounts for some 3% of global CO2 emissions, and which equates to, and Jens knows this better than I do, to if you'd like, the total emission profile of the country Germany, then we do believe that as ports we can make a difference. And we initiated the World Sport Climate Action Program, and Hamburg is a member of that initiative. And we seek to decarbonize, if you like, the value chain through policies, through efficiencies, through decarbonization of fuels, through smarter use of logistics, through decarbonization of the import facilities. Of course, we build our hypothesis on the knowledge and experience gained by embracing LNG as a bunker fuel. We have extensive facilities. We do not only have extensive facilities to import LNG, but we have bunker facilities. We have bunker barges floating around. So we have a quite extensive network of premises, offers to customers, allowing to service our customers to their best possible needs. And for instance, SIMOPS, we designed what would be required to have a safe LNG bunkering alongside the normal cargo handling. It's correct to assume that this is only the start. However, how that journey will develop for us is of course the big question, and hence we've decided not to aim for one single solution or a set of solutions, but to embrace the various innovations that may be associated. So it could be hydrogen, but it could also be, and I'm aware of developments with regards to carbon capture and storage aboard the ship during the journey. So what facilities should one provide to enable offloading of captured carbon during a journey? It could be indeed ammonia structures, could be methanol, it could be biosynthetic fuels, it could be electrification. So we are embracing various alternatives and opportunities together, and that's my wrap up, I suppose, together with various different coalitions. And so I tend not to believe in the mother of all coalitions, embracing all the challenges, but I focus on coalitions that I would describe as fit for purpose, So a coalition to decarbonize the inland shipping is a different coalition than the coalition we're working on to enable the introduction of hydrogen, or the coalition we're working towards to enable shore power, et cetera, et cetera. So we have various initiatives along a wide array of elements of the value chain and cross-fertilization of value chains in order to make an impact and reduce the profile. And in my last then introductory comment is to say and confirm that I am I've very vocally expressed my concerns with regards to the stance I am always taken so far. I do believe that the shipping industry is not harder to abate than many of the hard to abate sectors. And I can tell you from an experience, I mean, the industrial area, Rotterdam, accounts for some 16% of the total Dutch emissions. We have the largest factories and plants in the world, like Singapore, I would argue, with the Exxons and the BPs and the Shells, but also associated chemical industries. These all have a humongous challenge ahead. And I do not think that shipping industry's challenge is any bigger than theirs. So I think we should all kind of chip in our effort in order to address the planetary boundary challenges that we're all faced with. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will come back on this challenge later on in the second roundtable. Mr. Meier, also Hamburg Port Authority in his cluster review introduced a sustainability goal, and it was far from now. And among other projects, I was surprised, but luckily surprised about your floating solar powered mooring system on the river, very nice. And also to Hamburg Port Authority, I'm asking, maybe you face some problem and you were successful on some other topics. Please, could you share with us?
Yeah, thank you, Cristina, and hello to our friends in Singapore and Rotterdam. Normally I start always with some key messages while others are still talking about it. I think it's already being lived in Hamburg, like in Singapore and Rotterdam. I would like to add now, and our port has already done a lot of pioneering work with shore power, green LNG, and at the end, everybody is sure that the logical next step is, working with hydrogen. And Hamburg is the largest continuous industrial region in Germany with, for example, steel industry. And if there is enough time later on, I can share some examples, about green steel industry and so on. What we are working on, and one of our biggest targets is we aim to become climate neutral by 2040. That's our internal goal for the port, and this is our challenge, and this is also very important, for our stakeholders and our companies along the supply chain, but on the other hand also for the inhabitants live in, or the tourists visiting Hamburg, because we always call that our social license to operate is, that port work, industrial regions are only be accepted if the people see that we try to reduce emissions and pollutions, and that is our work where we are working on. And we started our project, we call that some years ago, creating a smart port, and some people got this wrong. Smart, it's like a smartphone or an app. For us, it was a strategy. We worked on that together with other friends worldwide. That means we started a project called Smart Port Logistics. And another pillar was, from the very first beginning, the Smart Port Energy pillar. And Smart Port Logistics is, get rid of the dependency of the old forms of energy consumption, stepping into using renewable energies. And it is getting logistic supply chains, get rid of unnecessary steps, empty trucks in the port or something like that, and getting to the step, the necessary transportation should be as low as possible in kind of pollution. And we started a lot of pioneering work like shore power for cruise vessels. And another thing I would like to share with you is it's always good to have friends and partners. We learned a lot from our friends from the United States, and we try to adopt that, learn from their best practices to adopt that to the European grip. We have frequency difference from the American standard to the European standard, but we implemented that. And I think as Port Authority, we are also responsible to show, showcases and let the people put their finger on the solutions. And this was, the first step on that. And LNG, the big bunker ports like Rotterdam and Singapore are well known. We also made our risk analysis for LNG fueling. We are not the big bunker port, and we don't want to become a big bunker port, but we would be able to serve everything together with partners and use the same standards. And therefore, I'm very grateful to have the chance to join Allard's initiative, World Ports Climate Action Program now, that we can share our knowledge and go in the same way with more or less the same speed and the same standards in the right direction. And the final thing I would like to point out is what we also have to find out is something like when we talk about hydrogen, the price competitiveness. If we want to have be successful in the big change coming from older forms of fuels, getting to the green fuels, I would like to see some specific regulations for the scale up and ramp up phases from the European Union to support that kind of stuff in the Green Deal environment. I think this would be very helpful, and especially ports are a perfect nucleus to start with that energy transition, starting point for the grid inside the countries, and but also for the whole maritime industry. That's for the first. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Coming back to the importance and the role of three pillars like new technology, digitalization, and decarbonization. It is crystal clear they are strictly linked to each other, and they are in a different way introduced in the value chain of your industry, the cluster you are part of. So I heard about standard regulations and so on. So looking at the increase of costs alongside the value chain, which could be, if there is just only one or few ones, a solution, for instance, increase the efficiency of the introduced technology to exploit better or to find out economy of scale, just a general agreement like standards, or Mrs. Hoon, which is, by your point of view, the best way to manage this potential increase of cost and decrease of competitiveness, at least looking at the all ports, as we know that the minimum of innovation should be scaled up to let all the ports enter in?
I would say that there is like no one solution, because in a way, decarbonization, we do expect the price to go up in future because new fuel comes with a new price tag, just like what Allard was mentioning. We need to look at the price competitiveness. However, if we talk about efficiency such as digitalization and new technology, there are opportunities to make yourself more efficient, therefore more cost effective. So case in point, for example, like for port clearance, because of actually COVID, prior to COVID, we were putting in place a one-stop port clearance process with all the government agencies in Singapore, and it accelerated. The take-up rate accelerated during the COVID period. So that in itself actually improves the time for ships to come and bunker and take marine services, therefore saves them actually money in terms of port stay, in terms of time lost. And that potentially could have a good ripple effect if it is sort of cascaded at the global level. In fact, what we are hoping to achieve is also to look at, like what you mentioned earlier, standardization of, for example, port clearance, which is something which the International Maritime Organization is looking at. In terms of port clearance, data that needs to be submitted, documents that need to be submitted, if all ports are able to harmonize, or that the port system sort of can talk to each other to draw the information that's been submitted, then that could potentially reduce cost. On decarbonization, it is indeed a tricky question. Question is, how do we incentivize first movers to come on board? It's like a coalition of willing, take away the first mover disadvantage, and like what Allard mentioned, cross-fertilization of the ideas, so that together as an industry, we all benefit from it. Jens mentioned about ramping up. No, indeed, I think in the next few years, we are on a ramp up phase. That will require green finance to be ramped up, because I think finance is still a concern that most companies have. Secondly, I would say it would require the whole value chain collaboration, because the challenge that we are facing is a global problem. It's also not just a shipping problem. It is a challenge across the whole value chain, including infrastructure, port, the ship, the engine, your class society, your shipyards, and all need to come together. And that's what we hope, at least in Singapore, to bring different players together to form a value chain ecosystem along the different fuel lines or energy lines, so that at least there is ideas and there's potentially commercialized solution that can be sort of shared around the world.
Many thanks. Many thanks. What I'm asking to you, Mr. Castelein, based on your privileged point of view, of course, we talk about different alternative fuels, ramp up and standardization. Put on a timeline all this input, which could be, if you can share with us your point of view, the best mix to shorten the timing for all this decarbonized system to be put in place, which is the best mix, and which is the part more meaningful and important to speed up, to boost the process?
Yeah, interesting question. And just building on Lee Hoon's very valuable comments, I think the idea I have in mind, and I tend to believe it's kind of the way it works, is that I truly believe that regulation should be set, and preferably not at a country level, certainly not at a port level, preferably at the regional level, and even preferred over that at a global level. So regulation should be set with regards to emission profile, for instance, like we've done on low sulfur and other measures. So regulation should be set. If there's regulation combined with ensuring there's a level playing field, so in other words, you avoid the waterbed effect that move volumes slip away and preferences are, if you like, skewed towards cost matters. So you create a level playing field through the regulation and the compensation if necessary. Then I'm convinced you'll create demand, and if you create demand, there will be supply. Now, I think all those elements need to be in order to exponentially grow particular solutions. Because if you have a technology solution, but it's not in the market from a pricing perspective, and the implication is that the volumes or your market share will fall by the wayside, it's not gonna catch on. So It needs to come together in conjunction. And then there's some practical issues to consider. How quickly could, if you like, volumes be supplied for? Now, it's fantastic that we assume that electrification is the savior of us all, but the reality is it's not feasible to ship a big container vessel or a VLCC just on battery power across the oceans. So you need to look at what your supply sources are, what the sustainability of that entire supply source is, and then again, the pricing mechanism, the regulation, et cetera, et cetera. I tend to think there's not one single silver bullet solution. I think we're in an era where various alternatives through innovation will begin to emerge, and some actually will emerge that we didn't think of some years ago. I mean, yes, we had hydrogen on our radar screen when we made our scenarios 4 or 5 years ago, but I am astounded by the exponential growth of hydrogen initiatives across the globe, certainly not only Europe, but I'm party to initiatives that are derived in Australia, in Chile, in Uruguay, in Saudi, in Oman, in Iceland, Portugal, Morocco, and there's no doubt many others to mention. So I think we will witness quite a distinctive period of where the combustion engine technology will be replaced by several other technologies, where I wouldn't even wish to assume that there's no future for combustion engine, because there's a lot of technology, there's a lot of history, there's a lot of research, there's a lot of development going into those developments as well. So if the combustion engine is ultimately developed with a full circular closed loop carbon system and applications, then clearly there's an opportunity for that as well. So this is a long and winding story just to confirm that you need to set the prerequisites right in order for technology to be able to flourish, and then you should enable the facilities that are necessary along that value chain. In other words, there's no use that there's only one port that will have the facilities to supply vessels with ammonia as hydrogen as a combustion as a fuel. Clearly, there need to be more ports. So here you need that collaboration across the various parts. But to my knowledge, there's not a clear winner. And I think there will be if you like, a suite of solutions for the various different applications. One can think of a daily ferry between Hong Kong and Shenzhen could easily be battery powered. One can think of regional feeder volumes also to have a combination of LNG capture CO2 on board with electromotors for import navigation. You can think of synthetic fuels and hydrogen for the longer journeys with point-to-point infrastructure. So I suspect we will be witnessing the development of a suite of solutions fit for purpose, depending on economies of scale, cost, and ease of rollout, if you like.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Mr. Meier, in a worst case or best case, based on your experience, which is the timeline, at least to complete this first phase of introduction of new digital system technology and decarbonization? And based on what Mr. Castelein suggested, are there any unexplored cooperation with stakeholders you envisage to make a step forward, facilitating the adoption, in a global way of such a new innovation?
Yeah, thanks, Cristina. I think Allard described it very well. I think, there are a lot of things to do, but the good thing is we have already started. And as everybody knows me as you know, a person who trusts in new technology, and new technology is key for this kind of sustainability or sustainable change. And there's a brand new study from Bain, from the company Bain. They say, okay, they see the central point for, you know, the big change coming after 2030. So they believe that then the landside driven vehicles and maybe smaller water driven vehicles can be driven by something like fuel cell technology, or maybe combustive by ammonia. For me, the very important thing is, you know, we have to be the supporters and not just think inside our port. We have to keep in mind that the ports are the knots in an international supply chain system, and also the knots in energy grids, you know, serving other areas. And if we do that in a good way, it is not just a win-win situation for the economy. It's also a must on this, what I always call the social license to operate, the acceptance that ports very close to a city like in Hamburg are still be able to stay in the position that they are accepted. And I see it very positive. To make it a little more concrete, you know, we are in the middle of testing phases for new sustainable technology using hydrogen in cars. I think it's worldwide well known. Some front runners, but also on the water side. We have developed already small solutions, and they are in testing periods. I'm absolutely sure that on bigger vessels, there's a chance to start with auxiliaries, with zero emission, maybe with fuel cells or e-fuels. And what I would like to point out, that I believe that we as port authorities, we also should, you know, put in place some real examples using the technologies. In the port of Hamburg, we start with shunting locomotives in the railway system. You know, that is also easier than the enormous ultra large container vessels. This will take much longer time to find the solution or the next generation solution after LNG, and LNG is not still really fully in place, but I believe we have to go via LNG, then maybe, I don't know, 20 years later than in the next generation of solutions. And we start also with vessels, but also with fuel cell driven drones. And you know, the consistency or the aggregate of hydrogen, this is important. You know, when you look at drones, it's like paste. You know, it's what we use for grills or in other circumstances. You know, there are chances for the research and development departments inside the stakeholder family of ports to show that it works. And on the other hand, I believe, you know, if the demand is there, and ports are fantastic areas to create or, you know, give the existing demand to the market, for example, in the steel industry or copper industry, or you name it, this is key to be successful at the end, to get ready in the scale-up period and make new technologies as soon as possible, ready for the market. And my experience, my personal experience is, as a project manager, sometimes we are too ambitious what we think, what we can do in the next year, but we absolutely underestimate very often what will happen during the next 5 years. And I believe that technology will go on very soon. We saw that now in the car industry with fuel cells. When we look at the Toyota Mirai production or something like that, the fuel cells are now really in place and they are working pretty well. And I believe that this kind of technology will come up soon for smaller implementations. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I guess we have a few minutes, and I would like to ask to each of you, ship owner are so far concentrating in a few big players, and you represent the global ports. But alongside the route, there are other ports of medium size with different purpose, like transshipment or industrial or commercial purposes. So if you could suggest to them, to minor port, let me say, it is not a good word, but how to put in place and which is the priority in terms of technology to be introduced in their port operations, for instance, the selection of one fuel unless another one, or suggesting to introducing innovation more in system or in other parts, which could be your suggestion, your point of view.
I can start first. So for Singapore, I mean, it's an interesting question because we are building a new port, Tuas Port, and where we're going to consolidate all our terminals. So exactly, we are actually starting from scratch. So the two key areas we're really focusing on is first, port efficiency. How do you put in place systems such that it can make your port efficient, whether it is just-in-time arrival, port clearance, linking up with other ports. And actually, we are at the stage of talking about global supply chain integration, logistics integration, cargo ships. So I would say first, really is focusing on port efficiency, systems that you can put in place. Second, there are actually a lot of great technology out there, like what Jens mentioned, in other sectors, aviation, land, and many of them can be used to cross-pollinate into our sector. And I would say so open up our minds to maritime technology, startups, other sector technology companies, and bring the good practices in and promote them. So 2 key points.
Mr. Meier, what's your point of view?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. You know, it is like this. I like to have a strategy which is open for new solutions coming out of the industry. So we never say you have to use hydrogen, or you have to use LNG, or you have to use something else. Our strategy is always, you know, we started with, let me call that 3-tier or tier 3 at birth, 0 emission at birth, then 0 emission at port. And how to reach that? It's up to what's coming up from the technology companies, from the propulsion companies, and so on. And we always try to stimulate them to reach the target. And the target is measured in reduced emissions by a certain level. And what I always would like to see is, if we talk about regulation or standards or something like that, Allard already mentioned that also, it should be, you know, the same layer for all of us. And then the industry should push to reach this kind of target. So I'm absolutely free. To be honest, we are testing a lot of things right now with hydrogen in Hamburg, because there was a big request coming up from the European Union. But there's no decision made already in which aggregate is ammonia, or is it liquid hydrogen, or is it something else? This is quite open right now, and we will see. And I'm looking forward to what will be the result. I'm supporting all the research and development companies right now.
Thank you very much. Your comments, Mr. Castelein, we have very few minutes, and suggestion based on your huge experience.
Yeah, it's a very valid question. And if I could, my simplest advice would be that one should not assume that you should want to invent the wheel yourself. There's a huge amount of initiative going on out there, and whether it's through the engine manufacturers, the OEMs, the shipping lines, the ports, the logistics providers, the digital companies, the IoT firms, the digital twin facilities that are being provided. So there's a huge array of solutions being offered, and I think it starts as an organization, whether it's support or whether you're a forwarder or whether you're a shipping line or a shipbuilder. It starts with opening your perspectives from an outside in type of approach, and linking up with entities and organizations that are leading the way. And that might at the outset look daunting. Where do you get started? But if you indeed start with your own operations, and then you start looking at your facilities, and then you start looking at your regulation, and you start looking at your hinterland, and you start looking at your customers, you have to take small steps. I often refer to the fact that energy transition is a long journey that has to be taken and entertained by a tremendous amount of players, each taking a small step at its own time. There's no huge step. There's not a silver bullet. There's not a one-way approach and solution to all. So it's starting with an external perspective. And if you don't know where to get started, I'm pretty sure my friends, Hoon and Jens, but certainly Port of Rotterdam, we're gladly prepared and ready. We have an international consultancy arm within the company. Call these people, fire myself otherwise, and they'll be available to help you along the way and to get you started and hopefully gain momentum within your own premises and within your own ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I apologize, we were a little bit late, but it is very interesting. A lot of questions, of course, but the time has a limit. So thank you so much again. It was an honor to moderate this panel. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Many thank you very much. Thank you very much.